Today and tomorrow, people of the Catholic faith all over the world are going to be celebrating All Saints Day and All Souls Day. If you caught last week's episode, we tried out a classic Mexican ofrenda called pan de muerto, or bread of the dead. This week, we're going to be trying out a beautiful salad from Guatemala called fiambre. We're going to be going over some fun history, do some grocery shopping, and of course, we're going to learn how to make it at home. Fiambre is a classic dish made in Guatemala between November 1st and 2nd for the celebrations of Todos Santos and Dia de los Fieles Difuntos, or All Saints Day and All Souls Day respectively. While sweet treats like Mexican pan de muerto seem to be the norm around the world, I decided to showcase fiambre this week as it's one of the very few savory dishes made specifically for this holiday. I typically like to take you guys on a field trip to a local restaurant to try out an authentic version, but Guatemalan restaurants are few and far between. And just like the fondue we made a couple weeks ago, fiambre is a dish best prepared with loved ones at home, so let's get started. I've got some good news and some bad news. Good news is that fiambre isn't a super technical dish, so we're not going to be using any special tools. But the bad news is that the ingredient list can be kinda wild. Today's recipe is fairly basic with only 30 ingredients, and a lot of those I'll mark as optional, so it's actually less. But I've seen plenty of recipes touching close to 50. You know when a waiter asks you if you want a soup or salad and you hear super salad? This is the super salad, and I guess it's kind of a soup and a salad too, but we'll get to that later. The basics of it are a bunch of different vegetables. Cabbage and pacayas or palm tree blossoms are pretty much essentials in most recipes, so we'll try to get our hands on some of those. The veggies are topped with an assortment of sausages and cold cuts, aka fiambres, I guess we know where the name comes from, and everything is drenched in a soupy dressing called a caldillo. There are two main versions of fiambre, red which contains beets and white which does not, and I guess there's kind of a third one which is called green, and that one's just a vegetarian one, but today we're going to be making the blanco version with sort of a green tinge to it, so I guess it's a light verde blanco something or another. We'll start off our shopping trip with the meats. I already have a fridge stocked with mortadella, ham, and porchetta, which should work fine, but a real fiambre needs to have some chorizo. Tradition dictates that we choose chorizo negro, colorado, and these little guys called butifarras. If you don't live near a Guatemalan carniceria, these specific versions are going to be a bit of a challenge to find. You can make it yourself, or you can do what I do on most days and just sub it with some normal Spanish-style chorizo. I say Spanish-style specifically because we want these guys to maintain their shape after they're cooked. The Mexican style is more made for crumbling into stuff. I got my chorizo and some of the more specific Latin American ingredients from this newish market called Mi Tiendita. I saw them driving by and man, this place is just awesome. They make all their own chorizo in-house and they even have American Wagyu in the case. Everyone working here is really nice too, so it's definitely worth a stop if you're in the area. A lot of these ingredients might look a little un-Guatemalan, and there's a reason for that. Fiambre is a classic example of cross-cultural, or for lack of a better term, fusion cuisine. Many of the ingredients like lettuce, mustard, cured meats, and other things are a direct result of Spanish colonial influence on the region. Much like pan de muerto, this dish, however European its ingredients might seem, is actually rooted in native tradition. For generations, native people have been honoring their dearly departed ones with offerings of food on special occasions. The classic folktale of this particular dish was that it was either invented by a nun who was in a rush to create a meal for All Saints Day from a bunch of random stuff in the church pantry, which people ended up loving, so it stuck around. Or story 2 is that it was born as a combination of food offerings from each family member, some bringing soup or vegetables or their favorite cured meats. Because of the widespread nature of the dish and the huge regional variations, in my opinion, I think that option 2 is probably the more likely story. And it also feels a little bit more heartwarming too. The idea behind fiambre is to bring the whole family together to remember and honor your loved ones. In my research for this episode, I came across a few articles and blogs claiming that the prototype of this dish was recorded in the mid-17th century by an English Dominican friar by the name of Thomas Gage. He originally traveled to Mexico around the mid-1600s as part of a Catholic mission, and he found the treatment of the friars at the hands of their supervisors to be so deplorable that he and a few of his compatriots escaped and traveled to Guatemala. There he made contact with the local branch of the Dominicans, the Catholic sect, not the island, and then joined their cause. But just like in Mexico, he grew disdain for his supervisors, and especially upset with their corruption and financial exploitation of the natives, he again packed up his things and escaped from Guatemala, this time back home to England, where he would later convert to Anglicanism. Now, what does this have to do with fiambre? So I read through his Chronicles of Guatemala in his book titled A New Survey of the West Indies, and I was actually unable to find any direct reference to fiambre that other blogs have claimed. I did, however, find his records of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day practices, and natives leaving offerings for the church. It goes to show that the locals have been doing this for a long time, and in these offerings he listed cold meats and vegetables, so I guess that could be seen as a pre-Fiambre sort of thing. Back in the 1600s, this book was a bestseller, and it's actually pretty entertaining. There's a funny part of the book that talks about the Spaniards' first time trying what I could only assume was a prickly pear. They were surprised that the fruit didn't taste, and I'm quoting here, evil, but they're mostly freaked out by the urine staining properties and thought they were peeing out a bunch of blood. Something less fun is that the Spaniards also used to rub teeny tiny spines of the cactus fruit into napkins and give them to people to use as a practical joke. Ouch. Something worth noting for those of you who want to read it, it's that it's an entertaining story, but Gage's book isn't exactly the most reliable source. He wrote this book after returning to England and leaving the Catholic faith, and of course after joining up with his new best buddy Oliver Cromwell. So it's got a bit of a pessimistic flavor, and most definitely exaggerates some of the details. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right, we were at the store. While you're at Mi Tiendita, you can also pick up some pacaya, which is this interesting looking vegetable. It's an unripe blossom of a special type of palm tree that's pretty much only eaten in Central America. Fresh would be best, but realistically the jarred version is as close as you're gonna get, and if you can't even find that, just grab some baby corn or something. Oh, and before I forget, grab some olives and capers too. You should be able to find these anywhere, but I got these guys at Trader Joe's. Next up, we're back at our old haunt Cupertino market for some veggies. I'll grab some cabbage, lettuce, green beans, radishes, carrots, green onions, and peppers. I think that these wax ones will look properly ghostly, so we'll work with those. Man, I love this place. All of that was 10 bucks. Let's head home and get to work. I'm gonna separate out the stuff that we're gonna cook and the stuff that we're gonna keep raw. Slice the cabbage into strips, the green beans into 1-inch pieces with the tips trimmed, and carrots should be cut up into bite-sized pieces. Since each of these vegetables cook at different rates, just do them one by one. The goal of these is to be softened but not mushy, basically al dente, so a few minutes for each should be just fine. Evacuate everything to a nice big bowl and get started on the sausages. I like to boil the sausages separately from the vegetables, and that's just because the vegetables give a lot of bitterness to the broth, and I want to be able to use that broth later on in the caldillo. I ended up boiling the sausages in beef broth instead of water or chicken stock, which is actually traditional, and that's just because I had some fresh beef broth lying around. Boil these guys until they're fully cooked and then evacuate to a bowl and let them cool down to room temperature. Okay, it's caldillo time, and this is where recipes can get very different. Every family has their own way to make caldillo dressing, broth thing, and this is the way that I developed for you guys. It starts off with an acidic broth. A basic fiambre blanco will have onion, thyme, parsley broth, or water, and mustard in it. So begin by dumping in the olive oil into a saucepan on medium-high heat. Saute the onion and garlic with a heavy pinch of salt, and when things start looking softened and fragrant, add in the thyme, stir for another minute, then add in your water and vinegar. Turn off the heat and let that sit for about 10 minutes to cool down and infuse, then strain out the solids. This brothy method of making dressing might look a little bit strange to some, but we've actually seen this technique before in the Swabian-style potato salad we made in our schnitzel episode, so go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. Toss this dressing in with the blanched vegetables and let it marinate for a bit while you work on the other components for the caldillo. The rojo version usually has some beet juice and roasted red peppers blended in its caldillo. I really love the kick of flavor that the roasted peppers bring to the rojo version, so I'm just going to do the same today, but to avoid tainting the color, I'm going to do it with these wax peppers. Just roast them over an open flame until they start to blister, then remove the seeds with a knife, and then get a paper towel to remove that skin. Roast up some of the bay leaves until they get nice and toasty, and then go back to your vegetables. Remove some of the broth, about a cup should do fine, put it in a blender with these other ingredients that you just prepared, and then actually add in another cup of that sausage boiling liquid. The sausage liquid is sort of reddish, and that's because we use red chorizo, but don't worry, we're going to cancel it out with this parsley, and actually it's a pretty traditional ingredient. Most caldillo recipes will have parsley or some other herb mixed in to give it some brightness. Add some black pepper and then blend everything until it's nice and smooth. Season it to taste with some salt, sugar, and additional vinegar if needed. Alright, it's finally time to assemble. There are as many ways to make fiambre as there are homes in Guatemala, so do it how you like. Some people like to do things the divorce style and keep all the ingredients separate for their dinner guests to just assemble later. I have thumbnails to make, so I'm gonna plate everything up now. I prepped the pacaya by removing the noodly bits from the stem, which can be kind of bitter. I then mixed it in with some of our other pickled stuff like the olives and the capers, and I lined the bowl with the lettuce leaves, piled in the marinated mixture, poured in the caldillo, then topped it off with the cold cuts, some sliced eggs, radish, and some cheese. This is a dish made in memory of your loved ones, so I'm gonna add in some shredded chicken this time. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Chicken is actually my old dog's nickname. I made this channel for him since he always loved to hang around me when I cooked, so this one's for you, little dude. Just like the smorgastarta that we made a few months ago for Midsommar, decorations can be anything from 60s grandma style all the way up to some avant-garde modernist mishmash, so do what you like. This looks passable, so we can finally top everything off with some grated Parmigiano or whatever tasty hard cheese you have, and bam, your fiambre is finished. You can taste each of the ingredients, and that caldillo is quite a special sauce. It's bright and slightly herbal, but still super deep, very complex with a slight bitterness. I guess it's kind of a metaphor for life. On a side note, I might just make this caldillo again someday. It seems like it'll go really great with some grilled seafood. I can see why fiambre is a holiday favorite. I enjoyed this guy with some good memories of my dearly departed and honestly had a great time. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you want me to try out your favorite dish, let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day.
My dad would ask, "What are you wearing to church this Sunday?" And I'll tell him, "Oh, I'm going to wear the pink suit or that dress or this and that." And he'll ask, "So, which shoes are you going to wear?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna wear those white pumps." And then I will go down to the kitchen. I'll be eating breakfast. Meanwhile, my dad will be ironing my dress. He'll be cleaning and polishing my shoes. And I told him he didn't, I always said, "Dad, you don't have to do that." But he always did. And in the morning, during the weekdays, again, I'm eating breakfast. My dad will be outside. He will warm up my car. He will wipe down the windows in the winter times, front and back. And if the gas gauge was less than half full, he always took it to the gas station and he would fill it up. So I never really knew I didn't really know how to put gas in my car. My dad always took care of me.